This is the fifth and final part of our conversation with Stephen Studdert, the man who worked for 3 U.S. presidents and was in charge of the 1989 inaugural of President George Bush. You can find earlier episodes on our blog at 249.com.
And one of the other things, too, is sometimes there might have been something that was a surprise for the president-elect, then the president, that we would conspire with the First Lady. And they had kind of fun doing that. For example, in George Bush Sr.'s, you may remember that he was the youngest Navy aviator in World War II. And he was shot down. And we brought in one of the aircraft identical to the one he was shot down, been restored, and all of his crewmates that were still living brought him in. And we didn't tell him. It was a surprise to him. First Lady was part of that great surprise.
What was his reaction?
He loved it. I mean, tears came instantly. He even today, to this day, when he talks about it, tears come for the Navy crew who rescued him out of the Pacific Ocean. And the tears are instantaneous every time it's talked about.
President-elect Trump has indicated his intention to come back from the inaugural and in the small portion of his day when he can accomplish some work to rescind some executive orders, maybe to put some in place, whatever the case may be there. But how quickly can they realistically have the West Wing up and running? There are only so many people who've been hired at that point. Is the West Wing relatively empty for a couple of days while people settle in? Because only the president's getting this type of treatment of moving things in and out of his office. Everybody else has their box with the plant.
Correct. And the entire Obama staff with their box and their plant has to be out of the building at noon. And the president's new staff, their passes become effective at noon, and they start coming in. The White House is not fully staffed, obviously, in the first week or the first month, but all the key positions are, because the White House functions. It doesn't take a week off. The functions of the White House and the National Security Council have to be seamless.
How are the inaugurals different between, say, President Reagan after the '84 campaign, so in January of '85, to President Bush in January of '89?
They were very similar in that, in many respects, the presidency of President Bush was viewed as a continuation of the Reagan presidency, at least the Reagan direction, the Reagan philosophy, the Reagan approach to government. So they were very similar in that regard. The differences are, for example, in President Bush's inaugural, there was a much larger presence from Texas. In Reagan's inaugurals, there was a much larger presence from California. You see those kind of things, but they're important things.
What kind of negotiations did you have to do with television networks? And now that's probably grown. I mean, when you did this, it would have been NBC, CBS, ABC,
CNN.
Probably not Fox, but CNN. And now, a much broader scope and probably social media platforms that want to be part of it and be credentialed in certain ways.
And foreign media, literally thousands, I would guess maybe 8,000 or 10,000 foreign journalists want to cover it. So you have to have a media plan. We had an extensive media staff to credential them, and given that the access that media has, there's all the security considerations and clearances through the Secret Service. That's an enormous task. And then all of it is some television entity wants to broadcast it.
Where does the outgoing president go after the
outgoing president
circumstances at the Capitol?
Who cares? No. The outgoing president and First Lady adjourn, escorted by the new president, to the east side of the Capitol. The outgoing president and the First Lady bid farewell to the new president and his First Lady, and they board what has been Marine One, the president's helicopter. It is no longer Marine One. It is merely a Marine helicopter, and fly to Andrews Air Force Base to get on what has been Air Force One and is now just tail number 29,000 to fly them home.
And that'll be different this time because the Obamas are
staying in Washington.
D.C. I don't know if they have plans to leave.
I haven't seen those announced yet, and generally for security reasons they're held right till the end. President Carter, for example, when he left office, he did not go to Georgia. President Reagan had asked him to represent the United States of America with outgoing Vice President Mondale and they went to Wiesbaden, Germany to welcome home the hostages freed from Iran that day.
What do you think of that decision, that particular one? That seems like a magnanimous thing to do.
It was magnanimous on Reagan's part. It was really telling. The hostages, as they stood, as President Carter and Vice President Mondale and former Secretary of State Cyrus Vance stood to shake hands with the released hostages, the hostages would not shake their hands.
Really?
They had such abject disrespect for President Carter allowing them to be held 444 days. Reagan made it known when he was elected that if those hostages aren't released by the time I take the oath of office, essentially I'm going to make your country a parking lot. And those hostages were released on Inauguration Day. I asked the Charge d'Affaires, who is the senior hostage, Bruce Langan, I asked him, I said, did you know who won the election? And he said, nobody told us, but we knew. We had a calendar, we knew it was Election Day, and our treatment began to change. We instantly, instead of getting a couple of bowls of Iranian gruel per day, all of a sudden we were getting 15,000 calories a day. We knew. And he said from that moment on they couldn't get us out of there fast enough.
What do you make of celebrities participating in the inaugural?
Oh, I think it's great. It's part of who we are. This is not only a very substantive and substantial and somber and sacred kind of event, it's also a moment to have a party. It's kind of America's party. And celebrities, at least in the television era, have been a great part of it.
What do you think of Utah's role in the inauguration? Not this one necessarily, but the three you were a part of. What roles did groups from Utah play?
When I was named head of 41's inaugural, named the director, I heard from a lot of people in Utah, maybe 300.
Friends you never knew yet?
No, I didn't. They were my new best friends,
Yeah.
why their daughter should sing the national anthem, or why their high school band should march in the inaugural parade. Well, understand you're getting those same pressures from all 50 states.
Yeah.
Utah always has a role. The ones I've been involved in, we had high school marching bands. We had a wonderful group of youth cloggers in the parade, and one of them, the Tabernacle Choir, was in George Bush Sr.'s parade, and and Reagan's parade. I believe in both of them, as I recall. So Utah, but remember, Utah is one of 55 states and territories, and there is a desire on the part of the inaugural committee to be able to have a balance so that all of those have representation.
When it's all over, party's done, the confetti's being swept up. Did you get a call from President Bush? Anything to say thanks, or does he just move on to the next thing?
No, he invited me to come in the Oval Office the next morning. He'd had a couple hours sleep, I'd had no sleep, and thanked me, just in a very gracious way. I had the same kind of experience with Ronald Reagan.
You'd been in the Oval Office before because of your involvement with President Reagan, but what did that mean to you to have delivered something big for the new president who had served as vice president in the administration that you'd been a part of? What was that like?
I wanted to say, I'm too tired to talk to you. I just want to go to bed. No, it was very humbling. And I would often, I've said this to myself, what's a kid from Spanish Fork, Utah, doing in the Oval Office? And I'd often ask myself that when I was in there. And then one day I just realized, well, not everybody could be from Spanish Fork, Utah. It was a humbling thing to have the President of the United States say thank you. And I just said, Mr. President, thank you for allowing me this privilege and honor.
Well, thank you for taking some time to talk to us about the inauguration. We'll be watching. You'll be watching?
I don't know. My PTSD may kick in. Marty, I'll just end you with this thought, that an inaugural is a wonderful thing. I hope people will just forget their partisan politics and realize this is a celebration of America and what a great country this is, and that we're really setting the standard for the world.